June 6th, 1944, the most important day of the Second World War. Before dawn, 7,000 ships are positioned in the English Channel. 13,000 aircraft are ready to fly. 156,000 soldiers are about to cross the water toward 5 beaches on the coast of German-occupied France. They have one chance, one day, one tide, one window that will not open again. If it fails, the war in Europe continues for years, possibly forever. If it succeeds, the beginning of the end of Nazi Germany starts today. This is D-Day, the story of the day that changed the world. D-Day didn't happen overnight. It was the product of 2 years of planning, logistics, and preparation on a scale that the world had never seen and has never seen since. By the spring of 1944, southern England had been transformed into the largest military staging area in history. Every road, every field, every port was packed with men, vehicles, ammunition, and equipment. Over 2 million soldiers from the United States, Britain, Canada, and a dozen other allied nations had been assembled, trained, and positioned for one operation. Operation Overlord. At the center of it all was one man, General Dwight E. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. A man who had never commanded troops in actual combat before this moment, and who now carried the weight of the most consequential military decision of the 20th century. The plan was extraordinarily complex. 5 beaches along a 50-mile stretch of the Normandy coast, codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. American forces would land on Utah and Omaha to the west. British and Canadian forces would take Gold, Juno, and Sword to the east. Airborne divisions would drop behind enemy lines the night before to secure the flanks. Everything had to work simultaneously. Every piece had to fall into place. But there was one problem nobody could solve: the weather. The invasion required specific conditions: calm seas, low winds, a full moon for the paratroopers, and a low tide at dawn for the beach landings. The meteorologists had identified a narrow window in early June that might work. Then the storm came. On June 4th, with troops already loaded onto ships, Eisenhower's chief meteorologist, Group Captain James Stagg, walked into the briefing room and delivered news that stopped the room cold. The weather was deteriorating. The operation would have to be postponed. 156,000 men were sent back to port. The invasion that the world had been building toward for 2 years was on hold. And then Stagg came back 24 hours later with a different forecast. A brief window, 36 hours of acceptable conditions, starting June 6th. Eisenhower sat in silence for several minutes. Then he looked up. Okay, let's go. June 6th, 1944, 6:30 a.m. The ramps drop. On 5 beaches along the coast of Normandy, thousands of men step out of landing craft into cold water, under fire, carrying everything they need to survive the next few hours. What happens next is different on each beach. Utah Beach, the westernmost American landing zone, goes relatively well. Strong currents push the first wave 2,000 meters south of the intended landing point. By accident, they land in a less heavily defended sector. Casualties are light by D-Day standards. By the end of the day, Utah is secure. Gold, Juno, and Sword, the British and Canadian beaches to the east, are brutal but manageable. The men fight through German defenses, take heavy casualties in the first waves, and push inland. By nightfall, they have established solid beachheads and linked up with each other along much of the front. And then there is Omaha. Omaha Beach is where D-Day almost dies. The American 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions land on a 6-mile stretch of beach overlooked by 100-foot bluffs. The German 352nd Infantry Division, a far more experienced and heavily armed unit than Allied intelligence had anticipated, is waiting for them at the top. Everything that can go wrong does go wrong. The preliminary naval bombardment misses most of the German defenses. Low cloud cover forces the bombers to delay their release, and their bombs land miles inland, leaving the beach obstacles and bunkers completely intact. The specially designed amphibious tanks, 32 of them launched into the rough sea to support the first wave, sink almost immediately. 27 tanks go to the bottom of the channel within minutes of launch. The men who were supposed to have armored support arrive on the beach alone. The landing craft navigate through smoke, spray, and chaos. Many come ashore at the wrong positions. Units that trained together for months are separated, mixed with strangers, stripped of their officers and NCOs in the first minutes of fighting. Men step off the ramps into water over their heads and drown before they reach the beach. Those who make it to shore find no cover. Just 300 meters of open sand between the water and the seawall, swept by machine gun fire from the bluffs above. Within the first hour, entire companies are destroyed. The sand at Omaha turns red. At 8:30 a.m., a message is transmitted back to the fleet. Situation on Omaha Beach. Chaos. Senior commanders offshore look at the reports and begin discussing the unthinkable. Abandoning Omaha entirely. Omaha Beach, 9 a.m. The beach is a killing ground. Hundreds of men are dead or wounded in the sand and surf. The survivors are pinned behind a narrow seawall at the base of the bluffs, unable to advance, unable to retreat, under continuous fire from German positions above them. For 2 hours, the invasion at Omaha has gone nowhere. And then something happens that no military plan could have predicted or engineered. Individual men start moving. Not because they received orders, not because the situation had improved, not because anyone told them the odds had changed. They moved because staying still meant dying, and moving forward was the only alternative. Small groups, sometimes just 2 or 3 men, began finding gaps in the German defenses, ravines and draws that offered partial cover from the fire on the open beach. They climbed, they pulled each other up, they attacked the German positions from the flanks and from behind, one bunker at a time. Brigadier General Norman Cota, assistant commander of the 29th Infantry Division, walked upright along the beach under fire, finding the men who were still capable of fighting and pointing them towards the bluffs. He is reported to have said something that became one of the most quoted lines of D-Day. 2 kinds of people are staying on this beach, the dead and those who are going to die. Now let's get the hell out of here. It worked. By late morning, small groups of Americans had reached the top of the bluffs at several points along Omaha. They attacked the German bunkers from above and behind, the direction the defenders had never expected the threat to come from. One by one, the German positions fell silent. Meanwhile, the German response to the entire invasion was paralyzed in ways that the Allies had specifically engineered. Hitler was asleep when the landings began. His staff, terrified to wake him, waited hours before informing him. When he finally reviewed the reports, he was convinced, partly because of Garbo's deception operation, that Normandy was not the real invasion. The main blow was still coming at Pas-de-Calais. He held the Panzer reserves back. Field Marshal Rommel, commander of the German forces defending the Atlantic Wall, was not even in France on June 6th. He had returned to Germany the day before to celebrate his wife's birthday, convinced by the weather reports that no invasion was possible for at least several days. He was driving back to his headquarters when the landings began, and the German commanders who did have forces available couldn't agree on how to use them. Rundstedt wanted to commit the Panzer reserves immediately. The orders had to come from Hitler. Hitler wasn't available. By the time the chain of command sorted itself out, the moment had passed. By the evening of June 6, 1944, all 5 Allied beachheads were established. Omaha, at the cost of approximately 2,000 American casualties in a single day, had held. The Atlantic Wall, which Hitler had spent years and billions of Reichsmarks building, had been breached in less than 24 hours. By nightfall on June 6, 1944, the question was no longer whether the Allies would stay in Normandy. They were staying. The numbers tell part of the story. In a single day, the Allies landed 156,000 men on 5 beaches. They lost approximately 10,000 killed, wounded, and missing, with Omaha accounting for the largest share of those casualties. Every one of those numbers represents a human being who crossed the channel that morning and didn't come back whole. But the strategic reality was clear. The Atlantic Wall had been breached. The German army in the west was now fighting on 2 fronts, holding the Normandy beachhead while still defending against the phantom invasion at Pas-de-Calais that would never come. The industrial and military power of the United States was now physically present on the European continent, and nothing Germany could do would change that. From June 6, 1944, the liberation of Western Europe was not a question of if, it was a question of when. Paris would be liberated in August, Brussels in September. The Rhine would be crossed in March 1945, and on May 8, 1945, less than 11 months after the ramps dropped on those 5 Norman beaches, Nazi Germany surrendered unconditionally. D-Day didn't win the war by itself. The soldiers who fought at Stalingrad, at El Alamein, in the Pacific, in the skies over Germany, they were all part of the same story. But on June 6, 1944, on 5 beaches with names that will never be forgotten, Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, Sword, the men who crossed that water made the ending possible. They were scared. They were cold. Many of them were seasick before they even reached the beach. They had every reason in the world to stay on the boat. They went anyway. If this video moved you, share it. Leave a comment with what you think was the most important moment of D-Day, and subscribe. Every week we bring you the real stories of the Second World War, the battles, the decisions, and the people who changed history. The next video is already coming. Don't miss it.